During the Nazi occupation of Italy, 18-year-old Elena Spizzicino became her family's lifeline, communicating and carrying food to her family's hiding places. In 1944, Elena's uncles were executed and her grandmother sent to perish in Auschwitz. As Elena wandered the streets of Rome, she had no idea what destiny would follow.
My grandfather, who was born actually in Bizerta, because his father was the Italian consul in Tunisia at the time. And when his father died, his mother took the baby and went over back to her native Livorno. Then he became a pharmacist, and he opened a pharmacy in Pisa. That's why he was living in Pisa. And my father married a woman from Rome, whom he met through. He was working for the factory that my great-grandfather had started, so on and so forth. So somebody fixed him up with my mother, and she was from Rome, and I was born in Pisa, and I lived there for the first 14 years of my life. And after that, the persecution started. The factory was sold to Marzotto, famous Italian family, but they were fascists, and the first thing they did, they fired the Jews who were working there. And my father was their accountant, so he found a job in Rome, and we all moved to Rome. And then, of course, they had started with the racial laws in 1938. So we lived many years of unpleasantness. We couldn't go to school, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. It was very bad. And finally, the Nazi took over, and then they just killed anybody that they could. That's another chapter that I don't want to delve into now. My mother's family, they were definitely Jews. My great-grandfather was one of the great innovators of Italian industry. But he started from the ghetto in 1870 when they finally emancipated the Jews in Rome. And they opened the doors of the ghetto, which had been closed before that time. So he became a big industrialist. But he was proud of his Judaism, and he practiced Judaism. He practiced religion in a practical way. On the other hand, it was built in them, their Judaism. It was part of their life. His children moved further and further away from the practices of Judaism. But like my grandmother used to say, the one who was killed in Auschwitz, one of his children, he says, "I am not observant, but I'm proud of my race." I'll never forget that. I left Italy in 1946. Met my husband, who was an American soldier. Of all things, I met him at the synagogue in Pisa, where I had gone visiting from Rome. And the army chaplain were running the service because the rabbi had been killed by the Nazi. So I went to visit an aunt and an uncle, and from my residence in Rome. And after 7 years that I was missing from the city, and I was told that services were held every Friday, so I decided to go there. And I met my husband, and we were married about 3 months later in Rome by the chief rabbi of Rome, and a rabbi that he brought from his camp. So my husband didn't speak a word of Italian, so when he was asked whether he wants to marry me, he did not answer. Why I came to Marco Island? Oh, I've always dreamt of the water, and I was really relegated to Dayton, Ohio, since I got married for many years. And we could never go to the water. I was brought up in Italy, where we're always close to the ocean or the Mediterranean Sea. And so finally, I remember that one day, I think it was 1974 or something like that, that a friend of mine who had a condominium in Marco Island, she invited us to another friend's place which would be empty. Why don't you go and you and your husband take a few days and go there? So we went, and I fell in love, literally fell in love. And I talked to a real estate agent and so forth, and he was, I sort of started somehow an acquaintance, and that was the end of that. Then several years passed, and in 1977, we decided to rent a place in Marcoana for a week, and we actually rented one of the apartments that my friend had contacts with. And when I was there, I decided to contact the agent. My husband was violently against it. So, but anyhow, he showed me some plans of some condominium was going to be built, and before we knew, I had put a deposit on it, and we went back to Dayton, and my husband said, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it. So I called up, canceled the order, but while I was talking, the man was trying to talk me back into it, and my husband started yelling, you really want the darn thing, get it. I said, my husband said yes. That's how I moved to Marco Island. It was not a joint venture, let's say, okay? And eventually he was more pleased than I was, but that's the way things work out sometimes. So we stayed there for a few months, and the first thing, when the place was completed, I had a real estate license in Ohio. But shortly after that, I got it for Florida as well. And probably the first seed for a temple, at that time, by the way, Marcoana was a very waspish community. The Jews who were there were trying not to even be known as Jews. That's the way it was when I moved in there. And we spent a few months out of the year there. And so our husbands, I got friendly with the lady Marjorie Seltzer. I met her at an Art Institute lecture, and we walked the beach together and so forth, so we struck friendship. Actually, the first seed was planted during a visit to a client of mine. I remember him as Dr. White. He was an elderly, retired plastic surgeon who had one of the early investors on the island. And when I visited him once, he pulled out a display that showed all the plans of Deltona, the developer, had for Marcoana. And it was color-coded to different sections of the island, either brown for commercial, another color for residential, and purple for churches. So I used that sheet of paper to show my client the original map of Deltona. And I kept saying, brown is for church, is for commercial, purple is for churches. And that thought sort of stuck in my mind. I said, why not a synagogue, you know? Why not a synagogue? So I had that thought, but it stayed there. It was sleeping in my mind, okay? Then comes Hanukkah, 1982. My friend calls me up, my friend Marjorie, and he says, how would you like to come to Temple Shalom for Hanukkah? I know they're having a nice get-together, etc. Our husbands were out of town. I love it. So then she calls me back, because my husband and I had sort of thought of joining the Temple Shalom in Naples, Florida, which was the only available house of worship and was about an hour away. And but there was nothing else. So she called me back and said, there's no room for you. I said, no room for me? I don't believe it. So I said, I called the president of the congregation and I said, my husband and I are planning to join our temple, you know, and I'd like to go to a Hanukkah shindig that you're planning. There is absolutely no room. So I said, Marjorie, the time has come. We got to do something about it right now. I feel that it's either now or never. We got to start a temple here. Out of it, just when here is the dates. On December 8, 1982, I contacted Deltona in Miami. And this very nice man that I never met, Paul Schaefer, answered the phone, and I explained to him. And I said, oh, by the way, Deltona was assigning the churches free of charge to groups who had services regularly, who incorporated, who built within a certain amount of time, or else they would lose their rights. But they had to follow certain rules of Deltona, which were quite strict. So, but I did not know all that. I knew that they had assigned church sites. So I called him up and I said, that's me, by the way, that was only me. We are in the process of organizing a Jewish temple here. And I'd like to know if if any of your land is still available and what are the conditions, etc. Well, let me send you a list of the available sites. And I said, fine. However, I said, I have a chart, one of your charts, and I have a particular site in mind that I really think would be suitable for our group. What do you suggest I do? What do I do to reserve it? He says, madam, you just did. I got goose pimples. I said, what? What am I going to do? I'm alone, So I said, Marjorie, we got to find some Jews to come to my apartment. Are there any Jews here in town? I mean, let's get together. Let's find them. So she found, and 13 people showed up, and I have the list of the people here that I wrote down, people that showed up in my apartment. And this was Laura Storab and daughter Gail. And there was a Mr. Kaplan that I don't remember the first name. Gail and Paul Stein. Paul became our first president. I never wanted to be president of anything, so I touched the person who was standing next to me at the meeting and I said, you be president. That came afterwards. Gail and Ken Mart, Marilyn Strite, Jerry Strite, that was her mother, Marjorie Seltzer, Sam Spector MB. He ended up doing a layman who ran the services, he volunteered. Bernice Nussbaum, George and Reva Miller. The first meeting, December 20th, 1982. Then afterwards, I was waiting for surgery. I was waiting for the hospital to call me. So everybody was, incidentally, was very enthusiastic at this meeting, except one person. And I was waiting for surgery, so I said, we like to, we have to advertise and do something, but I have to wait until I come back from the hospital. So we decided to have the next meeting a couple of weeks later, 2-3 weeks later. When our husbands came back from their business, they thought we had lost our mind. You're waiting for surgery and you're starting a temple, are you crazy? And also we got tremendously bad response from some of the Jews here in this island. Why do you undermine our beautiful Temple Shalom in Naples? I said, well, this is another community. Much later, it took us a while to gather 13 people. So here I already had a letter that he sent December 8th, which I thought that was crucial because by the time I had the first meeting, we had the land reserved for us. Then after that, we met again. We put an ad in the paper to say, Marco Island Jewish Group meets again. I have to read this. This is its support. Members of Marco Island Jewish community seeking to build a synagogue met December 20th at the home of Harold and Elena Rosner and agreed to hold Friday evening get-together for anybody who wants to participate. This Friday meeting will take place at 7:30 at the home of Mo and Sally Helpert, blah, 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 and so forth, where Marianne Brasters will talk about her recent trip to Palestine. Who knows what happened? Anyhow, Marco Island Jewish Group meets again. And they will hold the second meeting Friday to discuss blah, blah, blah. See, now Marco Jewish residents must travel to Pine Ridge Road in North Naples for the closest temple. Some residents travel to Miami. The Deltona Corporation has set aside several pieces of property for use by various religious groups on the island. A temple could be built on this donated property, etc. So this is the story. At the second meeting, 65 people showed up. And they decided definitely that they wanted to have me hold services every other week. I said, no, every week or nothing. So we started every week. Somebody donated the land. And the man got up and he says, I will run the services. He was a former Hebrew teacher. And I remember one woman, this Laura Storab, she got up and she says, I want to donate $100 to our new temple. So we just felt like we're making history. We don't know it, And this is our humble beginnings, really humble beginning. Yeah, January 21st, there's a letter from Paul Stein to confirm that he had reserved the land, and we had to follow certain rules. You have to build within a certain amount of time. We had to become incorporated. We have to hold regular services, which was a big thing. At first we got space from the Art League. We had our first Seder courtesy of the Catholic Church. And one of our first donations was from the Congregational Church. So it was, and then of course, afterwards came the jealousies and so forth, and all the complications that are connected to, because nobody could ever conceive that a woman could have done it. So men took over real quickly. I think at the dedication of the temple, I don't think I was even mentioned. But that's the way life is all over, you know. Things haven't changed. Life being what it is. And so we went on and on and on, and we had very smart people, very wealthy people, and a couple of years ago they dedicated a plaque at the temple in honor of me and Marjorie. I have always claimed that she and I are the co-founders. I never wanted to get the credit entire to myself, because without her I couldn't have done anything. So I did it, but she did it with me. I'm glad of what I've done, and I'm glad that it worked out so well. Never dreamt about that a housewife could do that. The temple, the only thing I want to close with, it really, that there is nothing any one of us cannot do as long as we set our mind to it. We have to have a clear goal. If we don't have a goal, we don't get there. And that's something to me it's been so important, because I decided I wanted something, and I went after it. And that's something that I try to instill in my children and grandchildren, because nothing is impossible if you really want to do it. That's all I can say.